Hello, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Fathers of Nations and by Paul B Vitta rather. And this in this episode, you're going to be looking at the stylistic devices. And to begin with, we're going to look at how dialogue has been used by and large in the Fathers of Nations. And of course, if you're coming across this work, it's your first time you bumped across it accidentally as usual. I usually say that you give a thumbs up, subscription, and of course a sharing with good friends, and leave me a nice soothing comment down there at the comment section. That will motivate me to keep on doing what I'm doing. Now, for you subscribing, it comes with benefits. In other words, you'll be the first one to be notified of future updates and you wouldn't be left out. So without that much further ado, let's get into our first language use, and that is dialogue in the Fathers of Nations as a novel. A dialogue is the most dominant style in the text. It is a direct conversation between two or more characters, or a conversation between two different groups of people, or a conversation between an individual and a certain group of people in the text. It has mainly been used to activate and dramatize several conflicts in the text. Now, that is not the end. What dialogue does, good learners pay attention to this, is that it helps to expose the character's traits. It's only through dialogue that you are likely to know, for example, a given character or a specific character is harsh, cruel, dishonest, because they will purportedly be saying some words which will be bringing out their character traits. And of course, dialogue is also one way of breaking the monotony of a narrative. Imagine a narrative that was just a narration from the beginning till the end, and we don't see anything in between here that really interests us. And of course, dialogue creates that particular engagement. In other words, it draws the readers into the stories because they would want to know who said what, what did they say, and what happened through the dialoguing. In other words, it is more interesting. It makes the narrative or that particular novel more interesting. You follow through. Now, there are several dialogues. Of course, there's the first one, which is used as they are maybe brought out in the text. The first one here, there's dialogue between the guide, who is now Mr. Abiola, and the four strangers who check in at the Seamount Hotel at Banjul. Professor Kimani, Pastor Chiamaka, Comrade Melusi, and Tahir, as he gives them the directives from the AGDA, and that is on pages 216 and page 19. There is use of dialogue between the journalist, that is Miss Mackenzie, and the guide, Dr. Afolabi, whereby Fiona calls Dr. Afolabi for the interview, and that is found on page 4 to 7. Dialogue happens between Tuni and her dad, Professor Kimani, her dad, Professor Kimani. In it, he tells her about the MPs, the members of parliament, and that is page 23. Asia and her husband, Professor Kimani, dialogue as she tells him of her resolution to marry newborn Walomu. There is dialogue between the MP Walomu and Professor Kimani when Kimani confronts him about marrying his wife Asia Omondi. Tad Longway and Professor Kimani engage in dialogue as Tad tries to convince Professor to join AGDA. Dialogue, of course, happens among Leo, Fiona, and Dr. Afolabi. In this dialogue, Dr. Afolabi rescues Fiona, then takes her to his room at the Seamount Hotel. That is on page 59. And there is also, of course, a dialogue which ensues between Tad Longway and Dr. Afolabi about his address at the Foundation for the Democratic Rule when Longway had come to talk to him about acting as a guide to Path Alpha. There is, of course, also a dialogue involving Issa, Pamela, and Dr. Afolabi about his new life, or about his new wife, rather, from the village, who had been brought by his cousin Femi to help Dr. Afolabi in bearing children since his wife doesn't want to have children. Comrade Melusi and Tad Longway engage in a dialogue where Melusi tells Longway how he fought for freedom in Zimbabwe. Longway has come to convince Melusi to join AGDA. Of course, that is found on page 99. There is, of course, also a dialogue between Tad and Chamaka over the phone about joining AGDA. Tad and Saif Tahir dialogue about the latter's joining AGDA as they talk more about the history of Libya. Page 124. Fiona and Longway threw a phone call at the booth of the Seamount Hotel on page 134 and on page 137 over a drink at the Seamount Hotel. Dr. Afolabi and Fiona dialogue in the latter's room at the Seamount Hotel. And then Afolabi also confirms that he is the guide, and that is on page 39. There is dialogue between Dr. Afolabi and the other presidents at the summit. In this dialogue, where he invites his counterparts to talk about Path Alpha, Bangura rather dialogues with the congregants at the summit as he leads them in making a choice between Path Alpha and Way Omega, and that is on chapter page 140, not chapter rather, there it's supposed to be page 140. Another style that evidently comes out in this particular novel is the rhetorical questions that have been widely and probably used. Now, rhetorical questions, what they do, good learners, is first of all, Paul B Vitta cannot just wake up from the middle of the night and then patch all these particular things there. He must have really worked through all this particular work, and therefore rhetorical questions are not accidentally patched here. What the rhetorical questions they do, they help us by and large to understand the narrator's feelings and thoughts. And through the rhetorical questions, we are, as the readers, we are invited to pre-assume the narrator's conditions or situations. In other words, either in a situation that calls for our sympathy, empathy, and that is usually done through these particular rhetorical questions. Those questions that don't need immediate responses or answers, they help us to know what the narrators are thinking and maybe feelings, and what they are going through is very, very much personal. Now, so these are questions asked here, asked to make a point or create a dramatic effect. They do not require answers since they are used to persuade or to pose. On page 5, 1 minute, 5 minutes, where is the difference? It's question. Page 10, all looks happy and why not? Page 63, why do people like to say lies? Let's now drop this gibberish for a while, okay? Rhetorical questions. Rhetorical question. And who told you that she hates children? What freedom and what work? Sorry, that is on page 87. On page 101, on 3 rather, had the man not taken in there and signing his own death warrant in the bargain? Page 117 we have, had he not closed down all foreign military, then had he not nationalized all foreign business in the country? Page 120, who was not at one time or another misinterpreted a kind word from a friend? Page 150, what it not invented by the cleverest 20 of the world's best and brightest, each a Nobel Prize winner? How could he answer a question that he has not heard and he was determined not to hear? Has the trick not saved the day? Had he not eliminated the need for the consensus he could not achieve? Flashback, that was very short there, but you can maybe pause along the video, maybe try to put them down. Flashback is also another stylistic device in Fathers of Nation. This is the window to an early occurrence or episodes or maybe happening that provides critical information to the main story. It is a situation where the author uses a scene set in a time earlier than the main story to link up with the events taking place in the main story. It is used here to help us understand better the present day elements and learn more about the characters. Also used to reveal the emotional struggles of the characters in the text. Flashback also reveals the insights of a character's actions. There is the use of flashback in chapter 2 about the life of Professor Kimani, his education journey, how he married Asiya, how he lost his only daughter Tony to a road accident, and now his marriage fell apart. Through it, we also know how he fought with an MP, landing him behind bars. This clearly tells us why he is where he is now, seeking justice and fighting for a change. There is also the use of flashback in the conversation between Comrade Melusi and Tad Longway, where Comrade Melusi talks about him and their leader fighting Smith in search of independence, and through these, we realize that the origin of his name, Comrade. We also get to learn through flashback how Comrade Melusi lost his wife, Siliza, through Guku Rahundi, which erupted due to the anti-government unrest in South Zimbabwe. That is found on page 90 to page 92. There is also the use of flashback in chapter 8, which tells us clearly how Professor Chineke Chamaka started preaching back then, how he developed his preaching career, and how he lost it and landing behind bars. He preached everywhere, indoors, in the strict privacy of a house, or in the limited publicity of a church. That is also evidently on around page 109. The flashback takes us way back to when he had a church of his own, with a welcoming bulletin in a church entrance, "God is watching you," and how he would make his sermons witty and persuasive up to until he mentions the undoing of the government, his pulpit, which changed his life for the worst by landing him in prison. The education ability of Engineer Saif Tahir has been brought out in the text through a flashback. He had come from overseas when the leader was celebrating his 20th year in power, and how he sided with him and even joined the Feast of Allah until the Al-Qaeda struck and changed his view. Flashback is also used to the author to tell us how Engineer Tahir lost his eye when he was served revenge by Rahma Mahmoud. Remember, with whom he had fallen in love, yet she did not respond to his expectation, leading to endless vengeance between them, and finally costing both of them their eyes. That is round populated around page 122. Through flashback, we also learn that Dr. Fulabi and his wife Pamela do not have children of their own. This is clearly brought out in chapter 5, where we learn how Femi, Dr. Fulabi's cousin, was sent to bring a second wife to Dr. Fulabi, since he and Pamela did not have children. This ends his marriage with Pamela. Vivid description. It is a style in the novel Fathers of the Nation. There is, of course, in any kind of narrative whereby events need to be described, there's got to be a way in which these particular events, the occurrences, and even the scenarios, the setting, they are painted as clear as they happened in the reader's mind, and that style calls for a description that is vivid, or vivid description. This is a way of creating very detailed and clear mental image to the audience about an event, a character, or a situation in the text. It is a style used to appeal to the senses of the audience, and therefore makes the audience to feel as if they are exactly at the spot where the author is describing. She was wearing a scarlet blouse, a black skirt, and red heels. Who's that? That was Fiona on page 4. We also have, she had her mother's eyes, wings of an imported butterfly, pure black in the middle, pure white at the margins. Those were Tony's eyes, page 24. See if that one is true, good learners. Go to the text and see and confirm for yourself that whatever that you're saying here, they're in the same line. You wouldn't want really to follow blindly. Asiya's behavior when she wanted to leave Professor Kimani for newborn, since Professor had become poor, has clearly been described in page 32. And we quote, "If he did as much appear about to touch her, she jumped back and shrank away. When he was near enough, he swung a fist. He missed. That is on page 37. The fight between Mr. Newborn and swung another Professor Kimani has clearly been described here. Her legs started kicking wildly, scissoring the air in frantic strokes. Fiona struggles to free herself from the man who wanted to take her by force, creates a mental picture in the reader's mind of how those events or the ordeal transpired. You can find that on page 58 and 59. The events leading to the accident of Pastor Chamaka and the accident altogether have been described on page 107 and 108. He could begin his sermon now. God is watching you. 110. The way Pastor Chamaka would begin his preaching. Big teeth, white, and big gums, purple. Rahma's face as she smiled. Her left cheek was capable of a dimple. That's on page 120. You'll find me standing near the phone booth. I am wearing white shoes and red dress with a white polka dots. Fiona describes her dressing code to Tad Longway, and that is exactly on page 130. A product of the strange practice that allows even the ugly kings to marry beautiful women. Gorgeous physique, gorgeous smile, the appearance of King Jemba, and that is on page 163. A very big thank you for watching. Reach me through that particular tiny little detail there, sherlockjohn@gmail. Drop me an email there, maybe of how you'd want us, maybe with some sentiments, thoughts, maybe a contribution on how you want us maybe to have this particular work done. And feel free also to holler me through the context. Those particular digits I've patched them down there. And very soon, I said in the previous videos that we're also going to come up with the family. We're going to have our group whereby we're going to partner in these. We're going to partner in these, and then even as we are growing, we are really growing. And I would want us to have a forum whereby I have got consistent and maybe, or we are going to make consistent and very dedicated individuals that we're going to come and have all this particular session coming out and growing up. Remember that this is a Liberty Media class, and it's not only English literature that you're only going to have here. We have sessions out there, and if you've been following through this particular work, reach me through that contact down there, and together we can really do great things, even as you're looking forward to give back to community. And above all, I just want to pause here and tell you that stay safe until we meet next time round. Cheers, good people. Cheers.